Hello, and thank you for joining me here on So Stitch Hex. I'm Miss Izzy, and today I'm going to be doing a review of The Language of the Corpse, The Power of the Cadaver in Germanic and Icelandic Sorcery by Cody Dickerson. So this was a great book, only like 76 pages, and one of the best quotes, which is just random, is where they talk about some of the weird stories. So it follows a more Norse kind of tradition where it's more oral. And a lot of the stories are passed down by word of mouth, so some of them have varying endings. And some of them, they don't even know what happened. Random little quote that I like at the back. I'm not good at the language, but I'm going to read anyway and try my best. Ab arm, ab rich, I'd tode glitch. Whether poor or rich, all is the same in death. And in here, it is a book on sorcery. It's on a book on necromancy. They talk a lot about Odin as the god and I guess king of the gallows, and the idea that he is of the dead, having hung from the tree. So in this book there's some really weird things that I really enjoy. Like they talk about horospacy, which is divination with the intestines of the dead, and I want to read of this one part. They talk about, in the context of such auguries, the corpse thus becomes a symbol of the highest degree of exchange between man and the divine, the sacrifice being the greatest possible offering. The corpse of the sacrificial victim, either human or animal, was often reported to have been left exposed, and in the case of the hanged dead at the temple of Uppsala, reported by Adam of Burman, men, horses, and dogs are said to have been hung throughout the trees in the sacred grove near the temple, and he reports that it was through their putrefaction that they were made holy. This idea that the dead have become holy through their sacrifice, and I found it really beautiful. They talked about mound sitting, which would just be sitting on the graves and speaking to the dead, and how for a brief time it became illegal. So you would have a couple other little stories in here that are cute. How they have the corpse door, which is the door that the corpses only would go out, because it was said that the corpse could only re-enter through the door that they left, and they would seal the door. They talk about the dragar, which are basically grave dwellers, or again walkers, which are very similar to vampire, or specifically more a revenant of speaking. The Proto-Indo-European phantom, or to deceive, is where the word comes from. And it's what you would do when you would bring the dead back to life. You would have to be very cautious of the dragar or of any type of creature that was brought back, because if you were not careful when you brought them back, if you did not dismiss them before you died, they would haunt your generation for at least 9 generations, which has to do with the other realms besides Midgard and Asgard, the other worlds, the 9 realms. And that's why it would haunt 9 generations, which is a really long time. There's actually a tale of a bull that was brought back. The creature was created by skinning the child, a calf, from the tail to the head, which is the opposite of how you would normally do such. Leaving the tail intact and stuffing it with all sorts of other parts from animals and herbs to give it magical abilities. And they sent it after this woman because she said no. She wouldn't marry him. Men, right? I'm just kidding, but also, like, seriously, that's some real toxic masculinity right there. What's going on? Anyways, and it killed her, and it terrorized her family, and then it got bored, and the guy didn't dismiss it, and it terrorized his family, and supposedly killed him by being in the form of a cat, but still the weight of a bull is what I'm assuming, based off the text, and it attacked him. So, I really like how they talk about in here, they talk about the dragar's vomit. If it touched you, is an omen preceding death. And if you touch the corpse, it would cause you to turn black and then rot and die. And it reminded me of Give the Dark My Love, and or the Revenants in Lost Girl, and what happened to Bo when she got all messed up with the underworld people. But you'd have to watch it to really know. The dragar can live for 120 years, and this talks about how they get stronger in their last 40. And it's a really interesting story. They talk about the use of grimoires and the use of runes, and how important the runes are in not just Nordic magic, but how it's reached into other types of witchcraft and generally affects most of Europe. They have some really weird ones. This is like that generic weirdness where they talk about using the cowl of a child, like using the head of a child for a spell. Using the human pieces are really important in here. They talk about the mummies, the mummies. I don't know how to say it, coming from mummies, but it's the body parts of humans being used for different magical means, being that it's going to cause you health benefits by using it. They also talk about how like finger bone, rib bone especially, and the head are some of the most important parts when being used in magic, although the head is really good in use in medicinal use. So that it can cure epilepsy, basically any ailment. Although the hands of thieves, especially body parts shaken expressly after they've died, are especially good for the purposes of medicinal use, which they talk about here. There's a lot of discussion of etymology, which I so love. Like, I can't pronounce words, but I love knowing the breakdown of the words and where it came from. They talk about some really weird concepts, the idea of the bearer and the sending. And some of these things are, so the bearer, or in this case the carrier, the tilbury, is in Iceland. So one of the examples is that the woman would get, they said woman, but I feel like any witch could do it. They would take the rib of a corpse, and usually they're grave robbing. They would take that piece, and once they have the human rib from the cemetery, preferably on Whit Sunday or Pentecost morning, be wrapped in stolen thread or gray wool. Why is it stolen? Why does it have to be gray? It doesn't have to be stolen gray wool, just gray wool, just stolen thread. Doesn't specify a color. I don't know why. But you take that and then you put it in the witch's bosom, and then you would go. And I thought this was a big waste of wine, but you would take the communion wine from 3 separate visits, and you wouldn't drink it. When you took it, you would hold it in your mouth and then spit it down your bosom so that it would feed it. And once you've done this 3 times, then you would make a small cut on the inner thigh where the tilbury mother, and I wonder if you could have a man be the father of the tilbury, but would make a small cut which would be identified by red warts, because the tilbury would then feed from this wound for the remainder of its life. Now this tilbury in this case is going after different things. It would go to farms, and it travels like a ball, which makes no sense because it's a bone, but I mean, you're feeding it, so it would gather as much as it could of cream, milk, and occasionally wool from the farms. And these are at the request of the mother. So why does she need all this stuff? Like, I don't know, but she'd ask it, and he'd go get it. And it says that the witch would bear so much, it would be too taxing, and she would, instead of, asking it to stop or not asking for it to shop for her, she would ask it to go gather the sheep droppings from the pastures, which would cause it, not wanting to disappoint its mother, to go gather all the shit. And all the shit would cause it to explode, and what you would find out in the field would be a pile of shit and a human rib. Like, she ate some fucking guy's one rib, or just like a part of a rib. Like, what? And that's one of the things they mention here. Another odd one that I greatly enjoyed was this old woman who she had a farm. There was a man, wife, child, and 2 servants, and they had a farm where they had horses. And they would, after slaughtering the horses, she gathered the biggest horse dick and slaughtered it in a bunch of herbs. Only one identifiable in the list that they gave, or the one that the author mentions, the only identifiable one was leek. A leek is used in the preservation of bodily fluids, such as breast milk and semen. That's what its magical purpose is. And they're using it on a horse dick. And the real reason, I think, is to preserve it for fertility purposes. They talk about it as if it's a fertility idol, but the author mentions there is no definitive knowledge of why they did it, or what they used, or why they used it. But being a phallic object, fertility herbs, and the fact that they have a farm would make me think, yeah, fertility. That's what it's for. Fertility and prosperity. They mention how they would pray over it every night, and that the king was the one who ultimately stopped them. The king and his 2 guards, who came as travelers, and while praying was just like, nah, screw this shit. Threw it down, fed it to a dog. It was like, ah! But that's what happened. And then they were just like, you're not going to be heathens anymore. You're going to be a Christian. And apparently they agreed, and all was good. That's the end of the story, but I don't believe that. But it was a weird one, and I enjoyed that quite much. Let me see. Here, they also have a inclusion of the creation story, with how they have the one from the Prose Edda, but they also have the other interpretation of it, and they talk about how Odin is again represented as not necessarily a creator, but a recreator. He's translated as spirit and life and soul, respectively, in the examples, but a more accurate translation is to render it as a breath, the breath of life. Mankind appears neither out of thin air nor dust, but as a manifestation of inspired divine magic and through an organic medium that was already a part of a previous life cycle. Much of this book talks about taking objects that used to have life or be a part of something that made life and giving them new life, imbuing them with a new spirit or a new sense of purpose that in some cases is like an egregore. And they even mention homunculi being an example from mandrake root, and the idea of a humanoid or a reanimated spirit that does your bidding. And a lot of that isn't here. They also mention where they don't know if a post-Christian Germanic theme or a Germanic thing that it transitioned from the original purpose of necromancy in here and sorcery was to gain occult and unknown knowledge from the other side. The whole purpose for any of it was to gain knowledge from the dead. That was the purpose. At some point, once Christianity started to breach into this regular traditions, it became about revenge and darkness. And the idea is that that's probably not what happened. They probably just focused on that or ignored the seeking of knowledge, which I greatly adore. So, this small book, you can get it for like $10. I greatly recommend it to anyone who is interested. It is a wonderful tale. It is a wonderful collection of tales, rather. And they mention so many different little tiny stories. There's a lot of other languages mentioned, or not other languages, other words in German and I guess Scandinavian, like inclusions that you wouldn't really know. I did a lot of separate research from this, looking up specific words, finding other ideas, trying to make sure that I knew what they meant by each term. Like, let me see. One of the idea here. Oh, this cute little thing just to briefly mention. They talk about trolls in here too. But this one guy gets a piece of driftwood, and they cover it. They fill the log with powerful incantations, clothe it, and give it a name. And it's alive, and it does their bidding. It becomes a sending, which is to like do what they're gonna do. They send it out. They talk about ascending, and it has other names mentioned here, where it is called another particular name I do not recall, but it's where you're sending it out to attack someone. I love these things where it's sending out, like that particular sending would go out and split their guts, and then they die, and then it will return to its master, where you would need to put it to sleep before, or you would be in trouble and your family would be in trouble. Put it to sleep before it kills you, or you die, just in general. But they talk about this other type of sending that would be sent out to attack. Specifically, it's a conglomeration of hair, needles, and pins, and it would go out with the intent to hurt someone. It's more of a North American tradition, where you would have to capture it with a witch's jar or a witch's bottle. A bottle generally filled with lots of salt and then other sharp objects, and usually either spit or urine, and it would stop. But it was one of the more better ways to trap it. And then, although they mentioned there that specific type of sending would be best dealt with by being chased back to the one who sent it out to you. And then that and it would be drowned and then burned, I believe is what they said, to get rid of them and things. So, very drastic way to end things, but, you know. They vaguely mentioned a couple other really odd ones. One being that you would get permission. Oh, I think this is mentioned in another book I've read before. I don't recall which book. I will find it, and I will talk about it eventually. But you get permission from a friend who's going to die, and you'll be like, hey, yo, before you die, can I have permission to have your skin? Yeah. And I am confused, because what if it's a man? What if it's a woman? And it would need to be a man enlisted in here, the scrotum being the pouch. But you would get permission to take their waist down as pants. Now, you would have to cut it out. You could not puncture it in any way, or it would be useless. And you would have gotten the permission for no reason. And you could potentially create a dragar of sorts, because it would then be an angered spirit, which would then come after you and cause all hella problems. Usually with livestock, but also with people, and it's just all around bad. But you would get permission to take the pants of the man. Pants. You would wear them, they would become one with your skin, and you would steal a coin from a grieving widow, preferably the widow of the man who had just died. And I wonder if you could wear this as a woman, but it would become one with you. And before you died, you could not die with the pants on, because it would create a dragar. You would either need to transfer it to someone else, getting permission to transfer the pants to someone else, or you would need to give them back and have the spirit actually accept possession of the pants back. It's super weird, because the money, it said the pouch would just fill with money. So like, you're just gonna have like literal jewels. Like literal jewels, family jewels, actually genuine. And you would have to get permission from the spirit to take it and to give it back. And if you died, or if you passed it on to someone else and they got it, they would have to pass it on, and basically I'll be good until the unlucky person who died with the pants on, which it becomes one with you, so it's supposed to appear as you, except for one tiny pouch. It'd be like really weird for someone trying to get like active with something like that. But the one person who dies, potential of creating a dragar, but also the potential of their immortal soul being in danger. They did not specify, but I assume this would mean going to like hell of sorts, or just being trapped in purgatory, or becoming a dragar like right out the gate, and not even getting to like just be dead for a minute. Like, you don't get to chill. No, now you gotta be evil spirit. That's what you're doing now. So, great book, full of stories. I just told like a handful of them, but I highly recommend this, especially if you're into necromancy and the use of spirits, or just making your tools do things. But most of the mentions here aren't exact how to do it, but it's enough to give you ideas on how to do it. It's enough to give you the illusion that you can figure it out if you work really hard. Plus, there's references to the original grimoires, which are not in English. Some of them have been translated, but are in limited supply. One I am looking for actively. So, thank you for joining me here on So Stitch Hex, and I hope you too look into this book. Alright.